will not be shaken, because you are covered by the blood of Jesus.
Something about that clip didn't sit right. Not with the internet, and reportedly not with Joe Rogan either. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. The moment Erika Kirk mentioned the name of Jesus, people claim Rogan paused, rewound it, and watched again. Not amused, not reacting, just studying. Because this is what he's known for, spotting when something doesn't add up. And according to online chatter, what he saw wasn't grief, wasn't faith. It felt like performance. At first, millions saw Erika as the grieving widow, holding on to Christianity for strength, speaking about legacy, pain, and purpose. But then the clips kept spreading. Small details started stacking up. Moments where the tone shifted, expressions didn't match the words, and questions quietly began forming. Why were certain phrases missing early on? Or why did later clips feel different? Why did one specific moment, just a split second, have people replaying it over and over? And when voices online began connecting those dots, the conversation changed fast. Because now it wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about authenticity. And if someone like Rogan, who built his entire reputation on calling out what feels off, allegedly took a second look and couldn't ignore it, then the real question becomes, are people seeing something real here? Or reading too much into something that was never meant to be questioned in the first place? At the beginning, nothing seemed out of place. In fact, it felt the opposite. It felt convincing. Erika Kirk appeared in front of millions as a grieving widow, holding herself together through faith, speaking about strength, purpose, or untrusting God in the middle of loss. The message resonated immediately. People weren't analysing her. They were supporting her. The Christian community especially embraced her, sharing her clips, praying for her, lifting her up as someone who represented resilience through belief. And in moments like that, audiences don't look for flaws. They look for something to hold on to. And Erika gave them that. Her presence online grew quickly. Interviews, podcast appearances, social media posts, all centered around one consistent narrative. Faith is what's keeping me standing. It was simple, powerful, and emotionally effective. And for a while, nobody questioned it. Because when someone is grieving publicly, people naturally give grace. They don't dissect every word. They don't slow down every frame. They don't ask what's missing. Oh, but then, small details started standing out. Not all at once, not loudly, just enough for a few people to notice. In those early interviews, people began pointing out something subtle. The absence of a name. Not faith, not God, but specifically Jesus. For many viewers, especially those deeply rooted in Christianity, that detail mattered. Still, most brushed it off. Different people express belief differently. Some are more general. Some are more specific. It didn't feel like proof of anything, until the conversations spread. Once larger voices began mentioning it, more people went back and re-watched the clips. Not emotionally this time, but analytically. And that's when the shift began. Because when you stop watching to feel and start watching to observe, everything looks different. Tone, timing, expression, word choice, the way certain moments land. And suddenly, what once felt natural started being questioned. Then came the turning point. After the discussion gained traction, Erika publicly used the name Jesus in a later clip, and instead of calming the conversation, it did the opposite. Viewers didn't react to what she said. They reacted to how it felt. The delivery, the expression, the timing. For some, it didn't land as heartfelt, it landed as deliberate. And that's when things escalated. Because once authenticity gets questioned, every detail becomes evidence. Clips started circulating faster. People replayed moments frame by frame. Discussions moved from support to suspicion. And somewhere in that shift, according to online reports, the clips reached Joe Rogan's orbit, a space known for analysing behaviour, not just listening to words. And that's what changed everything. Because this was no longer just about a grieving story people believed. It became about whether that story was being presented or performed. The entire narrative changed because of one moment. Not a long interview. Not a detailed statement. A few seconds. A single clip where Erika says the name Jesus. On the surface, it should have settled everything. If people were questioning her faith before, this was the moment that should have silenced the noise. But instead, it did the exact opposite. Because people didn't focus on the word. They focused on the reaction. The eyes, the pause, the shift in expression. Subtle, almost unnoticeable unless you were really paying attention. But once someone pointed it out, it spread fast. People started replaying it, slowing it down, and watching it over and over again. And what they claimed to see wasn't emotion. It was a switch. And according to online chatter, that's the exact clip that reportedly reached Joe Rogan. Now here's where things get interesting. Joe Rogan isn't known for blindly accepting narratives, emotional or not. Whether it's politics, science, or celebrity stories, his entire brand is built on one thing. If something feels off, he doesn't ignore it. And that's why this moment hit differently for people watching from the outside. Because according to sources and discussions circulating online, Rogan didn't laugh it off. He didn't react dramatically. He just paused, rewatched, and questioned it. Then reports claim he allegedly said something along the lines of, "That's not what a believer looks like." Now, to be clear, Rogan hasn't publicly confirmed this. No official statement, no episode, no direct commentary. But the idea that he noticed something, that alone was enough to push the conversation into a completely different direction. Because now it wasn't just random viewers analysing clips. It was the possibility that someone known for reading people saw the same thing. And that's the first twist. This story was never just about religion. It became about performance. Because once people started looking at Erika not as a grieving widow, but as someone potentially presenting a version of herself, everything else started getting pulled into question. Every interview, every post, every emotional moment. And then the deeper digging began. Journalists, online investigators, comment sections turning into research threads. And that's when another layer surfaced. The roommate story. For years, Erika had referenced a close friend she lived with, someone she described as a ride-or-die connection, a normal part of her past. Nothing unusual. Until journalist Jason Lee reportedly dug into it and claimed that this roommate wasn't just a friend. It was her cousin, Nicole Rothstein. Now, on its own, that might not seem like a big deal. People simplify stories all the time. But in a situation where authenticity is already being questioned, small details don't stay small. They become patterns. And then came the moment that pushed everything further. What Nicole herself reportedly commented publicly, stating that Erika has Jewish family roots, has celebrated Jewish traditions, and respects that religion deeply. Shortly after, that comment was deleted. But not before it was screenshotted, archived, shared, and just like that, the conversation shifted again, because now it wasn't just about how Erika expressed Christianity, it was about whether the identity being presented to millions was complete or carefully curated. That's the twist. Not that she has a complex background, that's normal, but that people started asking, why does it feel like parts of the story were being filtered? And once that question enters the conversation, there's no going back. Once the roommate details surfaced and the deleted comment began circulating, the conversation didn't slow down. It accelerated. Because now people weren't just reacting to clips anymore. They were digging, connecting names, looking into family links, rewatching old posts with a completely different mindset. And when the internet shifts into investigation mode, every detail becomes part of a bigger picture. The name Rothstein started getting attention. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but because people began tying it to Jewish heritage. Then came the claim that Erika had celebrated Jewish holidays in the past. Again, not unusual, not controversial. But in the context of a public image that was being presented as deeply rooted in Christianity, it raised questions, not about identity, but about consistency. And that's where the second major twist takes shape. And this was never about whether someone can have a mixed or layered background. It was about why that complexity didn't seem to match the version being shown to the public. Because as more clips resurfaced, people noticed something else, references to Shabbat Shalom, a phrase specifically tied to the Jewish Sabbath. In one story she shared, it was described as a warm, personal routine, something familiar, something practiced. And that detail, for many viewers, didn't feel like a casual mention. It felt personal, structured, real. And when you place that next to a very strong, emotionally driven Christian identity being presented to millions, critics didn't see contradiction, they saw curation. Now again, to be clear, none of this proves deception. People can belong to multiple traditions, explore different beliefs, or express faith in unique ways. That's completely normal. But the internet wasn't debating what's allowed. It was debating what feels authentic, and that's a completely different conversation. Because authenticity isn't about facts alone. It's about alignment. Do the words match the behavior? Does the story feel complete? Are details being simplified or selectively presented? And this is where Joe Rogan's alleged reaction becomes more relevant to people following the story. Not because he's a judge of truth, but because his entire reputation is built on reading between the lines, observing tone, behavior, inconsistencies. So when people heard that he reportedly watched those clips, noticed small shifts, and didn't immediately buy into the surface-level narrative, it reinforced what many were already starting to feel. That something wasn't adding up, and then came the deeper layer. Claims about extended family connections, mentions of relatives tied to institutions in Jerusalem, references to donations, projects, even historical sites. Again, nothing illegal, nothing inherently wrong. But when added to everything else, the clips, the deleted comment, the Shabbat reference, the earlier avoidance of certain religious language, it created a perception, not proof, perception, that the public image being presented might be only part of the full story. And that's the second twist. This isn't just about whether Erika Kirk is Christian, Jewish, or both. It's about why people feel like they're being shown a simplified version of something that's actually more complex. Because once that feeling sets in, every new detail doesn't clarify the story. It complicates it. And now the conversation has moved far beyond a single clip. It's about identity, presentation, and whether the audience is seeing the full truth or just the version that was meant to be seen. Once the conversation reached this point, it stopped being just another viral clip discussion. It turned into something much bigger. Because now people weren't just watching Erika Kirk, they were choosing sides. On one side, you had supporters saying this was being blown completely out of proportion. That grief looks different for everyone. That faith isn't one size fits all. That people online were over-analyzing facial expressions, twisting normal behavior into something suspicious. To them, this felt unfair. Like a grieving woman was being picked apart frame by frame during one of the hardest moments of her life. But on the other side, the doubt kept growing, because once trust is shaken even slightly, it doesn't take much for everything to feel questionable. And for many viewers, especially those who initially supported her, the shift was emotional. They didn't start from skepticism, they started from belief, which made the doubt hit harder. Clips were no longer just watched, they were studied. Comment sections turned into debates. Entire threads were built around analysing tone, timing, wording. People weren't just asking what she said anymore, they were asking why it felt the way it did. And that's where things became uncomfortable. Because this wasn't just about Erika anymore. It was about the audience, the same people who shared her content, defended her, prayed for her, were now questioning whether they had been emotionally invested in something that might not be exactly what it seemed. And that kind of realization creates tension, not just online, but internally. No one likes feeling misled, even if there's no clear proof of deception. Meanwhile, the silence added fuel to the fire, because as discussions got louder, there was no direct clarification addressing all the circulating claims. The clips, the background, the deleted comment, the Shabbat reference. And in situations like this, silence doesn't calm things down. It creates space, and the internet fills that space fast. Speculation grew, interpretations spread. People started connecting dots that may or may not belong together. And suddenly, what started as a few small observations turned into a full-blown narrative, one that kept evolving with every repost, every reaction, every breakdown video. And then, there's Joe Rogan's name still floating around the story. Not because he confirmed anything, but because he didn't. Because for someone known to speak openly, question everything, and call things out directly, his silence became part of the conversation itself. Some saw it as him still processing. Others saw it as quiet confirmation that something felt off. But the truth is, nobody really knows. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps this story alive. Because at its core, this isn't about proving someone right or wrong. It's about perception, trust, and how quickly public opinion can shift when something doesn't feel authentic anymore. And now the situation has reached a point where no matter what happens next, explanation, denial, or silence, the reaction will be just as intense. Because once doubt enters the picture, it doesn't leave quietly. At this point, the conversation feels like it's about religion, Christianity, Judaism, beliefs, identity. But what if that's not the real issue at all? What if the reason this story won't go away is something much simpler and much harder to ignore? Authenticity. Because when you strip everything else away, the clips, the comments, the background, the speculation, what people keep coming back to isn't what Erika believes. It's whether what they're seeing feels real. That's the final twist. This was never truly about whether someone says Jesus or Shabbat Shalom. It's about whether the person saying it believes it. And more importantly, whether the audience believes them. Joe Rogan's alleged reaction matters in this context not because he's some authority on faith, but because his entire identity is built around reading people. Long conversations, body language, tone, the difference between someone speaking from experience and someone constructing a moment as they go. So when people hear that he reportedly paused, replayed, and felt something was off, it validates a feeling many were already having but couldn't quite explain. Not proof. A feeling. And feelings are powerful, because once something feels performative, every detail starts reinforcing that idea. The earlier interviews, the later clips, the emotional tone, the background details, even silence starts to look intentional. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because what if Erika Kirk is being completely genuine? What if everything people are questioning is just the result of grief, pressure, and being in the public eye? That's possible. But here's the problem. Once authenticity is questioned publicly, even truth starts to look like performance. And that's the trap. Because now, no matter what she does, explain, clarify, stay silent, it will be filtered through doubt. And that leads to the cliffhanger that keeps this entire story alive. Is the internet uncovering something real, or creating a narrative that was never there to begin with? Because if this is a misunderstanding, then millions of people are dissecting someone's grief unfairly. But if it's not, then people believe they've caught something most weren't supposed to notice. And that's why this story isn't ending anytime soon. Because it's no longer about facts alone. It's about what people feel they're seeing. And once that feeling spreads, it becomes almost impossible to reverse. Now it all comes down to this. Not what Joe Rogan allegedly saw, not what clips are circulating, not what the internet is piecing together. What do you believe? Do you think people are reading too much into small details, turning normal human behavior into something suspicious? Or do you think there are real inconsistencies here that deserve answers? Because this isn't just about one person anymore, it's about how fast perception can change, how quickly support can turn into doubt, and how one moment, one clip, one feeling can completely rewrite the story people believed. So ask yourself, was that moment just grief being expressed in a different way? Or did it actually feel off? And if it did, is that enough to question everything else? And here's the bigger question. In today's world, where everything is recorded, replayed, and analysed, is it even possible to be fully understood anymore? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you think these conversations matter. Subscribe if you want more deep breakdowns like this, because stories like this don't end when the video ends. They evolve, and sometimes the next detail changes everything.